Bim Afolami.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to speak in this debate and indeed to follow some excellent maiden speeches. As I sit listening here, the themes are quite clear in this debate. We have generally an acceptance this bill is a good bill. Some like it a bit more than others, but generally it is a good bill. This is a landmark piece of legislation, not just for this country, but actually if you compare it to other countries in the world. You know, I think it's important sometimes in this House to actually look up and see what other countries are doing. And what we are doing here is admired, not just within this country, but outside this country as well. And we should commend the government for being so forthright. That does not mean we can't improve the bill and improve what we do, but let's just call a spade and say where we have done a good job, and this bill is a good bill. And in particular, the Office of Environmental Protection, which has attracted quite a lot of attention, quite rightly, because I think it is actually one of the most significant things established by this bill. It strikes me, though of course we will find out over the coming weeks and months, indeed years, how the organisation develops and interacts both with this House and the DEFRA ministers, and indeed with devolved administrations and how that all works. It strikes me as we've almost set up a sort of environmental national audit office. It appears to me like that's how it could end up developing. We all need to actually be a bit more realistic. We need to wake up, because this bill is actually more significant than we realise, because the enabling powers contained within this bill give us the foundation to start to deal with the huge changes that are going to come across our economy, our society, government, parliament, as a result of the action to combat climate change. You know, the net zero target by 2050, yes, some people want it to be by 2040 or 2030, and I understand that. But until we can get a handle on what we need to do to get there by 2050, which may seem like a long way, but it's only 30 years, and actually in policy terms 30 years is not a huge amount of time, we need to actually get our arms around this subject now and realise that the number of levers that we have to pull in order to get there by 2050, we have not yet pulled. And this bill will allow us to do so. And let me give a couple of examples. We all know that climate change is not something that we can solve in this country alone. It is an international effort. And so accompanying this bill, accompanying the agriculture bill, accompanying the fisheries bill, our whole framework of how we're looking at the environment, the government in the run-up to COP26 needs to set out an ambitious international strategy, both with spending from our aid budget, as the former Secretary of State mentioned, but also with diplomacy and high-level government commitment across the world. Because frankly, members, if we cannot convince other countries to take sort of action that we are taking, none of these problems will get anything like being solved. Another word I want to mention is incentives. Now, let us not forget the power of incentives and indeed subsidies. This bill gives us the framework with which we can remember the impact and the really positive impact that incentives can play. Look at what we've done on wind power and solar power over the last 10-15 years. There will be other areas where we can use it. Let's use this bill as a springboard in the run-up to COP26 so that we can use more incentives, more subsidies in the right areas, so that we can make the technological changes that we need and help our economy. As the honourable member, the lady for Cardiff North, was talking about the economy of the environment. The economy needs to flourish in order for the environment to flourish. They are intertwined, and using incentives in the right way can help us do that. Another thing is, frankly, the word is honesty. A lot of this is going to cost this country a lot of money. Let us be very straight about that. It's going to cost public sector money. It's going to cost private sector money, and not all of that money will be in this country. We're going to need international investment, inward investment in the technology, in the ways in which we do things, and indeed in research and development, so that we can develop the technology whether it be carbon capture and storage, whether it be battery technology, whatever it is, so that we can actually have a chance of achieving this target. And we all need to be a lot more honest with ourselves and indeed our constituents that this is going to cost a lot of money. And let us now start having that bigger conversation about how we pay for that. I suspect on this side of the House we may want to do things differently from that side of the House. But what we've got to agree is we've got to do it. And let's have that bigger conversation. And I believe that this bill gives us a framework and a basis on which to do that. I'd like to conclude with just two local issues which I think illustrate a wider point that has already come out in this debate. The first is Luton Airport. It's next to my constituency. Many of my constituents are very concerned about the air pollution impacts of an airport being so nearby a rural area. This bill gives us the ability to look at the air quality and hopefully to impose binding targets in that localised way. And the last point is on chalk streams. We have many historic chalk streams, unique in my constituency. This bill allows us to deal with abstraction in a smarter way going forward. But I'd just like to conclude by saying this is a good bill, but let us make sure this is the beginning, not the end of the process.